Hi, everybody. Up next with Kiona. Today, I have a great
Hi,
guest,
everybody.
Courtney
Next
Thomas.
week, Kiona.
Super excited to be with you today. Thank you so much for giving me your time. And yeah, it's been a while, Courtney. What's up?
I know, right? Yeah, this face to face. We haven't seen each other face to face in quite some time, but that's the world we're in right now. And it's amazing to be with you and others right now. This live conversation and just to reconnect and share. So thank you for this opportunity.
No, thank you. Tell us. So I know you very well. I've watched so many things that you've done in Kansas City, which has been absolutely amazing. I've watched you take an organization from literally like ground zero, from the foundation, and like literally rejuvenize and build it up. And now you're in a new endeavor with Newhouse, which is crazy. I learned something new. I did not realize that Newhouse Shelter is one of the oldest domestic violence shelters in Kansas City. But before we get to that, I wanted you to introduce yourself. Who is Courtney Thomas, and tell us about your beautiful family.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I wondered if I should like sing the song, Just a Small Town Girl, right?
Yeah.
So I'm from North Carolina. I have been in Kansas City now for 17 years, but Winston-Salem, North Carolina is my home. And folks who've heard me speak in the past have heard me say this many times, like the biggest and hardest transition of moving 1,100 miles away was giving up my hush puppies, my sweet tea, and my fried okra. But hey, the Midwest is coming along and you can get some of those things here now. But yeah, so I lived in North Carolina. I went to the Bryan School of Business and have an accounting degree, but knew I would say towards the end stages of my degree that living in that accounting world was not where I wanted to spend all of my time and energy, but I wanted to be able to leverage those skills to help me do good in the community. And at the age of 16, I got involved in animal welfare in North Carolina and working at shelters and working at veterinary hospitals, and just had a really strong passion towards that cause. So I was really fortunate to spend over 20 years of my life in volunteer capacity or in a job capacity in the animal welfare space. And that's what brought me to Kansas City. I came out to visit a friend and said, hey, take me to the place to get my animal fix, and took me to Wayside Waste. And I drove up that amazing long driveway and looked at this big 44-acre campus and said, oh my gosh, I've got to work there. And ironically, they had an opening on their website for a vice president, chief operating officer. And I thought, I'm super young. I'm in my 20s. I don't know that I've got a lot of or enough experience, I should say, to put my name in the hat. But I did it. I was the first person they interviewed, and they narrowed it down to 2 candidates. And I was one of them. They chose the person with 30 years tenure and experience.
Yeah.
Totally understandable, right?
Yeah.
But they said, hey, we want you to be on our team. So they offered me a different position within the organization. And within less than 2 years, I actually moved into that chief operating officer position and was able to really transform their business model and help put them on the national map. The organization had a high rate of euthanasia for pets. When I started, we were able to bring in a lot of innovative and cutting edge programs that allowed us to blaze the path and create a whole new perspective in a way that people see value and interact with pets and the healing benefits that they bring to families and people. And then I had the privilege to merge 2 organizations on the Kansas side to form Great Plains SPCA, where I served as the president and CEO for 6.5 years before going to Central Exchange and having the honor and privilege to meet wonderful people like you and help women really develop into the best possible version of themselves. And spent almost 3 years there at Central Exchange before stepping into a long time passion of mine, which was domestic violence. But I probably should have said first and foremost that I am a wife and I am a mom of 3 amazing kiddos and human kiddos. And now I am mom of 3 fur kids. We got a new puppy amidst this whole COVID crisis. Like, I don't know if that makes me the crazy lady or a saint, maybe something in between. I don't know, but he's been a lot of fun. And
I can only imagine.
Yeah. And I love being a part of this community. I have said so many times that Kansas City reminds me a lot of the town that I grew up in, Winston-Salem, which was a smaller community, but everybody was so connected and everybody is so committed to making the community the best it can be. And it has just really been an honor to be a part of Kansas City for the last 17 years. And I know that continued great things are ahead for our community. And after we come out of this
For
crisis,
sure.
that there's an opportunity of new being and a new way of thinking that I think we're all going to adapt and adopt. And I'm kind of excited about it, honestly.
Yeah, everybody has different perspectives about COVID-19 and getting our community, back and running as what it used to be. But I don't think that's the case, right? I think everybody's going to have to adapt to this new normal of just how the way things are going to be, structured and with CDC guidelines and social distancing. And so, what do you mentioned, or you touched on it a little bit, how much you love Kansas City and how a lot of our leaders have really, as they always do, show compassion and bring people together in a time such as critical need. I think Kansas City does a wonderful job at that. What do you think people's mindset should be, particularly leaders higher executives? We see this community's always been important, but now more than ever. And I feel like we're moving to a place in society, and primarily here in Kansas City, where people really care about matching the brand with passion. And so what should executive leaders, right? Because when we think about that, it starts from the top and then it trickles all the way down. What should they be thinking about, especially coming out of this and having this new change of perspective and all these different things that have been exposed? And so what is your take on that?
It's so funny that you asked this question, because during my morning walk today, I was like, okay, my latest blog, or my new blog that I'm going to write, is about what we can learn from puppies, teams, and COVID-19.
Yeah.
And, I really think that so many leaders already had this mindset and philosophy that people have to have the harmony between work and life. And I've said so many times that work is intended to simply be a part of your life, not to become your life, but so easily we can all allow it to consume us. And I think what this crisis has taught us is that people really, organizations can still be highly productive. Teams are incredibly productive and more so, more productive, more creative when we allow people to have that harmony, or some people call it balance, in their lives. And so my hope is that executive leaders take this opportunity where people have pivoted. We've all pivoted. We've all adjusted. We've all been flexible, and allowing people to continue to navigate having a life and having work, and leveraging technology and the ways that we have been able to stay connected. You don't have to be in the office to get the work done. And so often, I think many of us say, I get more work done when I'm not there than when I am there.
I hear a lot of you guys say that. I think more people on this show, even if there wasn't, they're like, yeah, I got this done, or, I was able to do this. And it's like, okay. And we talked about how working from home was impossible, and people are doing it. They're doing it right now.
Yeah.
So,
and it's so important, though, to think, because you can have the same issue when you work from home as you do when you allow work to consume your life, which is you're always on. And so I think you have to be very deliberate in setting a schedule and a cadence for yourself that say, okay, I'm going to start at this time, but I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to give myself an opportunity to get some fresh air, or I'm going to do my exercise, or I'm going to reach out to a friend, or I'm going to do an activity with my kiddo or my pet, or whatever it is, because the day will so quickly get away from you as you're head down, knocking things off of your to-do list. And then all of a sudden it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and you've worked a 12 to 14 hour day, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, the one thing that I would say we all have learned from this is we can do it. Like all the things that we think were impossible before, like we have beat the odds and proven it is possible for teams, businesses, organizations to still function amidst something that isn't our normal, that isn't the typical way that we have conducted or done business. And to see people being flexible and putting their boundaries down. As a nonprofit organization, we are heavily funded by grants, which require some reporting stipulations and accountabilities and processes. And, seeing people put some flexibility around things that allow organizations to, I use the word pivot a lot. I mean, I think that's a buzzword at this point, but I've used it for a long time, but it's a common word today, but we don't have to be as rigid as we thought that we had to be. Like, just be free and be open, and you're going to be far more productive and ultimately far more happy in your work life and in your home life when, doesn't have to be so rigid.
Yeah, that's really good. You said a lot, and I hope people, when they go back and watch this, they really take that in, because I think that's so important for people that are in those situations and in positions like yourselves to really understand that. And I think it just alleviates and just releases so much pressure off of people. And then you get better performance, and then you get better outcomes from your team members. I mean, I think, if anything, I know it wasn't a good situation that we're all home, but people are going to come out busted with this new perspective and ready to work and dive in. And so it's how do we cultivate and really capture this energy and this momentum and make it something worth for the rest of the remaining of 2020 going into 2021. And if you didn't, embrace it for your company or for your nonprofit, because it should always be like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's really good. I wanted to talk about next with you. It's no secret that with COVID-19 here in Kansas City, I've been watching Mayor Quinton, his press conferences, and we're talking about, how this has impacted every sector of our city. And so you can't help but think, two things: that everybody doesn't have a safe home to go to when we're in such a global pandemic and crisis. And so one of those sectors is domestic violence. And so we've seen peaks. I've kind of looked at that a little bit, and it's heartbreaking that women or men have to experience some of these things, that they don't have the opportunity to release themselves from from the people who portray those behaviors on them. Can you talk about that and what Newhouse Shelter is like? And then more so now, because I'm sure you guys are extremely busy.
I will say that when we first made the decision to send non-essentials home, that our team really had a hard time at the thought of people being stuck at home. It weighs very heavy on your chest. There's just this sense of impact and making a difference when you're physically there in the building, even though I'm not the therapist, or our CFO is not the intake advocate, or the teacher, or all of those things. We all know that our job contributes to the well-being and the healing and recovery of other people. And so feeling as though you're not there physically on site, and that people are now stuck in situations of isolation where they don't have the ability to escape their abuser, to make a phone call, to develop a safety plan, to ask for help, kept us all up at night. And you've seen the news, you've seen the statistics that domestic violence is on a significant rise and spike during the isolation and shutdown. And what is so interesting for us is the number of calls has actually gone down. And I gave the answer away just a moment ago to say people are stuck in isolation. They can't get to a safe place to call. So when people look statistically and say, oh, that's great news, call volume is down. No, that's not good news. When call volume goes down, then there's something wrong. And don't get me wrong, we are making progress towards breaking the cycle, but we are nowhere near there yet. And so people don't, excuse me for a second, my allergies. Anybody else having crazy allergy issues?
Me.
Oh my gosh. I was on a call earlier, sneezing seven times in a row, but when calls are down, that does not necessarily mean that people are safe. And so our encouragement has been, to people that know of individuals that they feel perhaps are not safe at home. This is an opportunity for you to do more check-ins, and not just by phone call, but encouraging FaceTime, encouraging Zoom meetings, encouraging opportunities where you can see that individual, make eye contact, to physically see their expression, their body language, their behaviors, to have a better understanding of how they're doing at home. It's also an opportunity for loved ones or those that you're close with to develop a safety word that if you are in a crisis situation and you need help and you can't reach out and say those words, I need help, that there is a code word that you are using to describe to that individual, trusted individual, that you need help. Thinking about the children as well who are in abusive homes or witnessing abuse in homes, and now they don't have school. They don't have the safety net of their teachers or their counselors who are monitoring them. That it has been heavy. It's been hard thinking about that. And what I hope is that the media has brought enough attention to this situation and to this crisis that people now have a true understanding that this is a community problem. This is not something that impacts one socioeconomic class or one race or one gender of individuals, but domestic violence is a multifaceted community problem that takes us all working together to solve. There's not one agency that has the resources or the talent or the and we're all very talented, don't get me wrong. But my point is, if we don't view this as a community problem, we will never get anywhere. But violence impacts everyone. Even if you are not the person who is being abused, or you don't have a direct family member or friend who is being abused, the impacts to the economics in our community alone is substantial and significant.
Yeah. What would you say it will take for some measures? I know just Newhouse Shelter having the space, right, physically, so intake can happen for people who are seeking safe shelter. But what are some other things that, as a community, it is our problem? It's not just Newhouse or Rosebrook or these other domestic entities. So what does Kansas City need to do? Is there some gaps? Are there things that it's like, we're doing this great, but if we had this, it would help more? What are some of those things that have been exposed during this time specifically?
Yeah, well, I think that there are a couple things. I mean, we know in the nonprofit sector that financial resources are always the number one barrier. If we had more money, we could fill in the blank.
Yeah.
If there was a greater level of awareness, we could fill in the blank. And so I do think that to some degree, this crisis has created some opportunity in both of those spaces. People, organizations are asking for help, and people are stepping forward, and everyone understanding that you may not have $100 to give, but I want you to know that the $10 that you have to give, that feeds a child. That feeds a child for several days within our organization, and for everybody to understand. Maybe you can't give money, but you can give of your time. So you can serve as a volunteer. You can give of your networks by just telling the story. Again, what I found so fascinating stepping into this industry, and I'm a childhood survivor of domestic violence, so this is a very personal passion to me. And I found when I stepped into this role, so many people, many of whom that I've known for years and years, some decades, are coming forward and saying, I'm a survivor now, or in my childhood, this was my experience at home.
Yeah.
And, we know the statistics, 1 in 4 women will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. 1 in 7 men will experience intimate partner violence. And so I think, the community, again, accepting that this is a community problem. And when you see an empty seat at work, don't just assume that person's on PTO. Don't just assume that person's not feeling well today. It could be indicative of, that empty seat can mean a problem is going on at home. And how are we connecting? And I think this COVID situation, to some degree, has connected us more than we've ever been connected before. So teams are meeting more. Some teams are meeting more frequently and are more actively engaging with one another than they did when they're down the hall in the building at the facility. And so I think that one lesson is, don't wait to connect. Like relationships need to be cultivated, and just reaching out to someone to say, I care about you. I'm here for you. I'm just calling to check in, see how you're doing. the power of that to open up a conversation, to give you an opportunity to be a helping hand is significant. So I think that that's one thing we've learned in this COVID crisis is the power of connection, the power of reaching out, the power of togetherness. We've been kind of forced into this togetherness. Someone posted, the other day, you've probably seen it from a number of people. I think Michelle Wimes posted it, and she's one of my favorite people ever, by the way. She should be on your show.
She should be.
We are all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And so I think that, I hope that I said that correctly. If not, it's close enough. But, we are all traveling down the same. We're all traveling down the same path, but it's not the same for each of us. And so, acknowledging your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and how I'm feeling is how I'm feeling, and how you're feeling is how you're feeling. But we're all in this crisis and situation, together, and ensuring that we are validating that. And I'm here for you, and I care about you, and what can I do to help and support will open up the doors, for many opportunities for us to provide a higher level of support to each other going forward.
That's amazing. I didn't really take in that when you see an empty seat at work, just because someone says they're taking PTO today, that does not necessarily mean it's PTO. And so, people need to do a better job at, I'm just not here at work today and I'm a project manager, or I'm, social media, or no, it's like, how are you doing? And I think that's like, we just get so caught up in like work and what we're doing and deadlines. And honestly, like my take on this whole thing is what's been great for us, what's been worse for us economically has been the best for us morally and socially. Because we need to reframe and we need to do these things. But before we go into Newhouse Shelter and some of the needs, and I did some little research myself because I got some good stuff coming up. I'm going to be at one of those, the no other pub, no other brunch event. For July 18th, which I'm like, man, unlimited mimosas. I need to be there. Like, what are some of the, I guess, the signs? Like, I know we always hear that, right? Like, okay, we already know the signs of domestic violence. Like, why do we need to discuss this? But I mean, like, if you are at work, or, you really haven't experienced it, or, even men, people think men don't get abused. Can we talk about that? That's different. So just what are the signs and I guess the stereotypes of men don't experience abuse?
Yeah, it's so interesting. When I stepped into this position, I remember telling a gentleman that is a good friend of mine, like, now, where are you going to work? And I said, Newhouse, the domestic violence shelter here in Kansas City. And he said, oh, that is not a happy place. Like, that's not a happy mission. And I said, but that's our job. Our job is to create the happiness and opportunity in someone's life as they're stepping out of, trauma. And I was explaining, we serve women and children and men. And he said, men? You serve men? And I said, yeah, you mean men get abused? Yeah, they do. And I think it's harder sometimes for them to step forward because of the stereotypes and the implications or perceptions that people have around that. That's one of the things I am most proud of about our organization is there's no judgment. We serve people that have experienced any kind of domestic abuse. So it is not just direct intimate partner abuse. Perhaps you're a person that has a disability of some sort and your caregiver is abusing you, or you are, an elderly individual, being abused by a caregiver or a younger child. So we are serving a wide array of individuals, and from a gender perspective, all genders. So, and I want to emphasize that, all genders. So we accept everyone who needs our help. And 50% of our residents are children. And I think that is something that our community really needs to embrace. And certainly where my emphasis and focus is, children is where we have the greatest opportunity to really influence and break the cycle. We can provide the resources to adults as we do from a therapeutic standpoint and resources and so forth to help them to gain economic stability, to gain housing and the other things that they need to be whole again. But it is really focusing on the next generation that gives us the opportunity to truly break the cycle. So I know I just kind of went down a rabbit hole, and now I forgot the question that you asked me. But you know, your question was about the events and
yes, it's signs, kind of like some of the signs. We cliche them, like we go over them all the time. People talk about it in school to the kids. I think teachers are aware of some of the signs, but as social media and all these different nuances that kids, you know, you just mentioned 50% of you guys as residents as kids. That's a lot for kids. They're experiencing things much more probably earlier on than you know. So it's like, how do we deal with that? Is there, like, what are those signs that people should be looking for that see people every single day?
Right. Well, the most common, obviously, you know, I was talking with someone the other day, and people hear the term and phrase domestic violence, and they immediately go to this visual in their head of someone with a black eye.
Yeah.
That's a reality. The physical violence is 100% a reality of what we see, but there's also the emotional abuse. There is the starvation of engagement with other people, if you will. I don't necessarily mean starvation of food, although that is sometimes those necessity resources are taken away from people as a means of control. So the domestic violence piece is really about having the physical and mental control of another individual and leveraging violence or deprivation of essential items from that person's life to maintain your control over them. I was reading something the other day that related to the COVID-19 and the isolation piece of sleep deprivation being a form of abuse, that abusers are not letting their victims, you know, sleep and get rest, and are waking them up. And it's an article that I was reading, and probably confusing people by bringing it up now. But again, I'm sharing it just simply to say that this perception of physical violence or visible wounds on the body is simply one form of violence. And there are so many other forms of domestic violence that emotionally impact people and create trauma in their lives. So if you're experiencing a person who is in a relationship that begins to get very, very quiet, and they are pulling themselves away from interaction with other people, you know, that is a sign that there could be something wrong. It doesn't always mean that there is something wrong. Depression is a sign or symptom as well. We see people that from a mental wellness or mental health perspective, you know, again, domestic violence is multifaceted and multi-layered. So when you have a situation where you're living in trauma every day, it impacts so many other elements of your life. And the financial resources, if you see a person or hear a person speak about their, you know, finances shifting significantly, or not having access to the funds that they need, not having the essentials that, you know, we have all become so accustomed to. So toiletries and clothing, and, you know, access to go and engage and interact with other people. So no longer can I go to happy hour or drinks with friends after work. Those controlling behaviors are certainly the greatest sign or symptom or change in someone's behavior around those things. It's time to ask some questions. Are you doing okay? Is there anything that you need? How are you feeling? And begin that dialogue and conversation with people. Sometimes that's all it takes, is for a person to be invited to tell their story. They aren't going to tell their story on their own out of fear of retaliation or action from their abuser. They aren't going to tell their story out of embarrassment that, gosh, I don't want anybody to know that this is the life I'm living, or that this is happening to me. Shame is something that so many of our survivors experience, that they place the blame and the guilt on themselves, and they carry a lot of shit. What did I do? What could I have done differently? I shouldn't have. I could have. And that's part of our, therapeutic practice with them, to help them understand that no one deserves to live in a life of fear or in a life of violence. And you deserve something better and greater than that. And our role is to help you to achieve that.
Courtney, you're a lifesaver. This is a lot. And this is great information for people to know. Do you think that Newhouse Shelter services are going to increase after the stay-at-home order is released and people are able to get out and move and function and, create that distance away from their situations and maybe not even the situation, but just needing help? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So right now we've seen a significant spike in our outreach services. So when the stay-at-home order went in place, we did not accept new people into the shelter for the protection of the people that were the health and safety of our workers and the people who were already in the shelter. The shelter was pretty full. We're always full. Like, we've got 88 beds and there are never enough beds. So an interesting statistic to share is that, in our Kansas City metro area, we turn away almost an equal number, slightly higher number of individuals that we help every year. So let that sink in for a second. We turn away virtually the same number of individuals that we have the privilege and opportunity to serve. Like, the need is exponential. And I don't think that our community truly realizes that, that the need is so high and that there aren't enough resources. There are about 345, 350-ish beds in Kansas City for survivors of domestic violence, and Newhouse has 88 of those beds at our shelter.
Yeah. Take us to kind of like the background of Newhouse Shelter. I love the name, by the way, because it sounds to me, if I'm in that situation, I'm like Newhouse Shelter. It brings enlightenment and positivity. So that marketing was brilliant. Take us, like, how did you guys start? I mentioned earlier on in the show that you guys are the oldest in Kansas City to be in this service, and kind of your team, your great team, and just how they impact services with you guys and your the people that stay there.
Yeah, the organization has definitely evolved over the years. We started in 1971, and the idea and concept at that time was that we would be a food pantry and we would provide, resources, clothing resources, and other things to individuals in the community who had a need. And a few years following that humble start, we actually had our first shelter. So a house with rooms where people could come for safety. And in 1999, we were in a position to move into a larger organization, a larger facility, that increased our capacity for service. And we do, from a therapeutic perspective, have, on-site therapists, adult therapists, children's therapists, case managers, court advocates who are shepherding people through that really scary process of going to court and trying to get their protection orders, and not understanding really, how do I navigate this in a way that creates the best plan of safety for myself and for my children or my family. We have our children's therapists, as I mentioned, on site, but also are the only shelter that has an on-site school for children kindergarten through 6th grade.
Wow.
So we know that children that are living in environments of domestic violence, many of them are far behind when it comes to their education, sometimes as much as 18 to 24 months behind their peers in the classroom. And that is because of the situation, they miss a lot of school. They have behavioral challenges that are a result of what they have experienced. They are trying to deal with at a young age things that, again, no one should have to deal with, particularly the younger generation whose minds are not developed in such a way that they understand and know how to properly process through that.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of play therapy, sand tray therapy, modalities that really help garner conversation and opportunity for us to reshape their thinking process and reverse some of those developmental impacts of trauma. That is our focus. Then we also have our preschool area for children that are newborn up to age 5. And that's a place that is one of the highlights of my day every day, that we're there to go in and just say hi to the kids and get their hugs and watch them through this process of their own personal healing. So those are a couple of things that are unique about our organization. We are really using this time of, COVID-19, and I just joined the team. So I think it's important to say, I just started in January and was there for 2 months before we stepped into this COVID crisis. So that has been an interesting journey all by itself, right? But we've leveraged this time and opportunity to really think about the future and the impact that we know that we can create in the future, and how do we do more? And I say that very cautiously, because more does not always mean better. Because you're doing more, it doesn't mean you're doing better. So really focusing on where you mentioned earlier, where are the gaps in our community? Where is there opportunity for us to have a greater level of long-term impact on the people that I say we have the privilege to serve? It takes a lot of courage and bravery for a person to step out of their situation into a whole new environment where you're living communally with other people. It's a big deal. It's a big deal to step out of your situation. And I'm not talking about just from a safety perspective, but just where you are psychologically in the process. And there's a lot of comfort knowing, I think, for so many, once they take that brave step to step out and they come to the shelter, they're not alone. You're surrounded by so many other people that are walking that same path. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe they're not walking down, or they don't have the same shoes. They're not wearing the same shoes, but you're both walking down the same path together.
Yeah. It's really cool that you guys are honing in on those type of services that are, so tangible to Kansas Cityans that really need it the most. And kudos to you and your team, even though I know you, like you mentioned, you haven't been there as long this year, but I mean, it's still important work, and they're blessed to have you there. And what a great team you guys have there, because it takes a lot, as you mentioned, for somebody to step outside of their comfort zone and admit that that's a place that you need help. But it's also, on the flip side, shows how much more, need in the area that you guys need to have more capacity and expansion to not turn away half of what you get in the same year. And that number is just right there. So that speaks a lot to, I guess, what we're not paying attention to. And as you mentioned, something that stuck out to me personally was, just because people are not calling, that does not mean that there's not problems. And so I just feel like there's just so much going on, and with the kids and not being at school, and, maybe that 8 hours in the day, that's when kids don't see any of that. That's the only normal part of their day. That's right. They're okay, I can be a kid. I can be on the playground, see my teacher, get a meal. If that's the case as well. And so there's so much, but you guys have some great things post COVID-19 that is coming up that I wrote down. I was like, holy moly, Courtney, you got some good stuff coming up.
It's going to be exciting. Yeah, we've been working really hard. So we're excited to the next couple of months. It's going to be a big time.
Yeah, the first one, No Other Brunch, which is July 18th, 11 to 1 at No Other Pub, which I've never been there. Tell us about that.
Well, so our events planner extraordinaire, Christopher Stibbs, on our team is really taking the lead on that. And so it's a way for us to bring in the younger generation into our mission. Hey, yeah.
That's me.
That's right. That's not me. But
yeah.
To bring the younger generation, into our mission in a fun way, in a cost-effective way, where, it doesn't cost a lot to participate, and some of those dollars that you're spending go back to serve, the people on the front lines of our mission. So that'll be a great time. Who doesn't love brunch? Who doesn't love mimosas? We just wrapped up, actually, in April, I was like, what month are we in here? We're still in April, but we had our luncheon event, our New Day luncheon, which was scheduled for the end of March, and we had to cancel that. So March 28th, and had to be postponed for the COVID-19. So within a 5-day time window, we converted that into a virtual event and launched the event virtually, and actually raised more money this year than we did last year. So that was pretty awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah, very proud of our team. Like, our team has just embraced this change and just handled it so well, and just been so creative and so innovative, and so proud of them. And then we have our gala. Excuse me, we have our gala still planned in November 7th, the Imagine a Day gala. And the whole idea around Imagine a Day is, imagine a day that the beds are all empty at Newhouse. Imagine a day that our playground where the children play is quiet. Imagine a day that we don't have a need for our services. And together we do have that opportunity to build a stronger tomorrow. So we encourage folks, fall is just around the corner. Like, we're stepping into summer, we're stepping out of this crazy time. But remember that your presence, your engagement, just simply hitting the share button, going to Facebook, liking our page, following our posts, helping other people to see that this is a cause that you care about, that this is a community problem, an opportunity for us to link arms and unify, and dig into some of those bigger issues. And one of the things that we know is the disparity between available resources to people in our community. Access to healthcare, access to mental health, access to childcare, access to food. Like, how do we create more equity in our community that eliminates a lot of these problems that the nonprofit organizations are here solving together? So how can we collaborate as a community? How do I support your mission in an effort that strengthens mine and strengthens yours at the same time? I mean, how do we leverage the fact that this community has so much already there? Excuse me, my allergies, goodness.
No,
how do we leverage, all that exists in our community to truly strengthen the work that we're all doing? Because when we help children and adults thrive, our community thrives.
I feel like we just need to drop the mic and just end the whole conversation. You said a whole bunch, and BXKC, that's what we pride ourselves in. We want to be the ecosystem in Kansas City that is reaching between the owl and being the dots in between the lines, as Craig would say, my co-founder. That's his motto. I truly believe that Kansas City already has the people, the resources, the entities that we need to be great. It's just now time for really some succinct planning, really, like, not just what Greater Kansas City Chamber is doing, like what are they doing, and who's like literally like, hey, like what's going on here with these other chambers, or hey, what's going on with Newhouse? It's almost like having a liaison, but just people that are gathering and really being able to take ownership in that. And so your story, and just today, like, I feel inspired just by listening to you, and just knowing that, Newhouse Shelter is working hard to spread that message to people like me. And I think that your team is just doing an amazing job at doing that. And I'm blessed to have you, as I already mentioned. And this is great. Any remaining thoughts that you have?
Well, I would just say this, that you asked earlier, how people can get involved. And I mentioned, obviously the financial contributions are always needed, sharing our story. But I would be remiss not to mention there's opportunities for people to volunteer. So right before this COVID crisis hit, we were in the process of renovating our residence rooms. So we've been in this facility since 1999, and there's not really an opportunity to take a pause, hit the stop button. Domestic violence doesn't stop despite a health crisis or despite whatever is happening in your community. So the organization has not done renovations in a long time. And
Gotcha.
We had some groups that were lined up to help us with that work. We did a fundraiser called Share Your Love with Newhouse right around Valentine's Day. The goal was to renovate 24 rooms. We've raised the money for about 18 of those rooms right now. And we need groups and folks that are interested in helping us to do the work. So there are volunteer opportunities on site, off site, at events. So like maybe you're not on social media. Maybe you don't have the financial resources to give, but your time is one of the greatest gifts that you could ever, extend to us. And from a service perspective, perhaps you're a person that can help us to provide more job training skills for our residents. Maybe you do yoga with kids, and or maybe you do art, and you can come in and provide those services and activities for our residents. We talk all the time of really wanting to have a recreational therapist on staff and someone who's helping us to more, very regularly create a cadence of opportunity for the people who are living with us. But I also want to say, like, hats off to you. So I've had the honor and privilege to watch you over the last couple of years, our first introduction at Central Exchange, and the way that you have just blossomed and spread your wings and created togetherness and had conversations that need to be had. More of them need to be had in our community. I just want to applaud you and say thank you, Kiona, for what you are doing to make our community a better place. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that, Courtney. We will see each other soon. For those of you that tuned in, thank you so much this afternoon. We'll be back tonight at 8 p.m. We're going to talk to founder of Gangster Goodies Kitchen, Courtney. Her name is Sheila Johnson. So you got some time, if you're not playing with Ainsley and the dog. She's going to literally tell us what we should be eating. A lot of people are at home. So, obviously with our body, it's more important than what we're consuming, not just getting hot Cheetos at midnight and, doing some crazy stuff. So want to make sure what we're putting in our body is healthy and we're not gaining all kinds of crazy bad habits. So right back here, 8 p.m. Thank you so much, Courtney, again. Thank you all for joining. See you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Courtney, that was great.